By July 1941, the Eastern Front had become the most violent corridor of destruction in human history. The Wehrmacht's mechanized columns tore through the Soviet Union at a pace that made the conquest of France look sluggish. City after city fell. Minsk, Smolensk. The Red Army bled divisions by the dozen, trading space for time in a retreat that swallowed entire nations. But the Soviets were not simply running. They were burning. Stalin's scorched earth order demanded that anything of value be destroyed before the Germans could use it. Factories dynamited, bridges dropped into rivers, grain stores set ablaze. And buried beneath this wasteland, hidden in the basements of the most important buildings in the most important cities, Soviet engineers left something far worse than scorched earth. They left the F-10 radio-controlled mine, not a frontline weapon, not a conventional booby trap. The F-10 was an invisible, patient executioner, engineered to lie dormant for weeks beneath captured buildings, waiting for a coded radio signal to detonate thousands of pounds of high explosive directly beneath German command posts. This is the story of how the Soviet Union turned its own cities into weapons. If you're interested in how wars are actually decided by logistics, math, weapons, and doctrine, subscribe now, turn on notifications, and stay tuned for more in-depth World War II analysis. Let's continue. The F-10 was not improvised in desperation. Engineers WWII and V. Mitkovich had been developing radio-controlled demolition systems since 1929, over a decade before the invasion. Each unit functioned like a combination lock in electromagnetic form. A triple-frequency tuning fork mechanism listened for 3 specific radio signals transmitted in sequence on long-wave frequencies. Only when that exact pattern arrived, in the correct order, did the mine complete its detonation circuit. A random broadcast could not trigger it. Atmospheric interference could not trigger it. Only the coded sequence from a Soviet operator with the matching radio set could wake the device. The system operated on frequencies between roughly 130 and 1,100 kHz, long wavelengths chosen because they penetrate soil, brick, and concrete. A 30-meter copper antenna buried horizontally in shallow trenches picked up the signal. The entire apparatus weighed around 35 kilograms, powered by a rechargeable battery, giving it an operational life of 40 to 60 days, with some configurations stretching toward 3 months through a clock mechanism that cycled between active and dormant states. But the genius was not the technology, it was the target selection. Soviet intelligence understood German occupation doctrine with clinical precision. When the Wehrmacht captured a city, rear area staff followed a predictable pattern. Seized the largest, most intact administrative buildings with multiple floors, telephone infrastructure, and institutional architecture. Former ministries, municipal offices, large commercial buildings. These were the structures German quartermasters and logistics coordinators would inevitably commandeer. So these were the exact buildings the Soviets mined. In early July 1941, as German forces pushed toward Kiev, sapper teams worked through pre-midnight darkness in the Ukrainian capital. They excavated burial pits reaching 5 meters depth, lowering roughly 600 kilograms of explosive to foundation level where detonation would trigger catastrophic structural collapse. F-10 receivers followed, wired to detonators and sealed against moisture. Above ground, separate teams buried 30-meter antenna trenches, backfilled to match surrounding surfaces. By dawn, the installations were invisible. The buildings stood silent over their charges, looking exactly like prime real estate a conquering army would claim, which was precisely the point. On September 19, 1941, the Wehrmacht rolled into Kiev after a massive encirclement that trapped over 600,000 Soviet soldiers. German trucks carrying filing cabinets and communications equipment moved toward the administrative district. Staff claimed the imposing office buildings, strung telephone wire through corridors, and hung operational maps on the walls. 5 meters beneath their floorboards, the F-10 mines waited. German occupation authorities established routine patterns within days. Orderlies carried message traffic between departments. Switchboard operators connected field commanders through dedicated lines. Quartermasters tracked supply expenditure across 6 field armies. The machinery of occupation hummed to life in buildings specifically selected, months earlier, to die. 5 days after occupation, the Earth answered. On the morning of September 24th, a Soviet radio operator stationed on a Dnieper River island, roughly a kilometer east, transmitted a coded pulse matching the buried receivers. The signal crossed the river and penetrated the urban landscape in a fraction of a second. Beneath the largest structure on Khreshchatyk Street, the triple tuning fork decoded the sequence. One fork after another locked into oscillation. The final relay closed, and 600 kilograms of explosive detonated at foundation depth. The blast converted the building's stone foundation into shrapnel. Load-bearing walls disintegrated. The upper floors collapsed inward within seconds. The explosion excavated a crater more than 10 meters across, with debris raining across a 50-meter radius. German soldiers within 100 meters suffered catastrophic injuries from overpressure. A 5-story headquarters had become a smoking crater wider than a tennis court, and it was only the beginning. Over the next 4 days, additional F-10 mines detonated across multiple buildings in Kiev's administrative center. A second blast collapsed a logistics headquarters, killing and wounding over 100 personnel. A third destroyed a former bank, serving as a paymaster office. A fourth eliminated a military police headquarters. By 28 September, the cascade had gutted significant portions of Army Group South's rear area command infrastructure. Wehrmacht authorities evacuated all multi-story buildings in central Kiev, dispersing headquarters into temporary field encampments. The most valuable buildings in the city had become death traps. The Kiev explosions sent shockwaves far beyond the blast radius. Every German headquarters in every occupied city faced the same question: is this building wired to explode? In Kharkov, the Soviet saboteur Ilya Starinov had already prepared the answer. His team reached the city on October 3rd, 3 weeks before German arrival. They excavated a 5 meters depth, lowered 600 kilograms of explosive, and installed an F-10 receiver set for mid-November activation. Then, Starinov added a stroke of genius. At 2 meters depth, precisely where German engineers had been finding charges elsewhere, he installed a decoy, a conventional mine with 40 kilograms of explosive and a visible clock mechanism. Its ticking matched the frequency German listening microphones had been calibrated to detect after intelligence recovered from a captured device in September. The decoy deliberately matched specifications now circulating through Wehrmacht units. When the 68th Infantry Division entered Kharkov and requisitioned the building, sappers swept with listening equipment. At 2 meters, they detected ticking. They excavated, removed the mine, and certified the building safe. The divisional commander, General Lieutenant Georg von Braun, moved his headquarters in that afternoon. Operations officers, logistics sections, intelligence staff, and communications personnel settled into the cleared building, establishing a command hub for 3 infantry regiments. The countermining procedures developed after Kiev had worked exactly as designed. The building was safe. 3 meters below the depth they searched, 600 kilograms of explosive, waited in clay darkness. On November 14th, a Soviet operator hundreds of kilometers behind the lines transmitted the activation signal. The triple tuning fork activated in sequence. The relay closed. The blast collapsed the headquarters within seconds. Von Braun was killed when the concussive wave struck his building 80 meters from the epicenter, collapsing the wall behind his desk. Over 100 personnel died, with nearly 100 more wounded. Starinov had weaponized the Germans' own countermining doctrine against them. Meanwhile, in Odessa, the same doctrine had already claimed its toll. On October 29th, roughly 800 kilograms of explosive beneath a converted opera house killed Major General Ion Glogojanu and 16 Romanian staff officers. Between late September and mid-November, the mining campaign eliminated command infrastructure across 3 Ukrainian cities in 7 weeks. The paranoia inflicted damage no blast radius could measure. Wehrmacht records documented 43 engineering detachments diverted from combat bridge building to tearing apart requisitioned buildings across Ukraine. 28 bomb disposal squads operated in Kiev alone, spending 8-hour shifts destroying building interiors, searching for receivers. Frozen ground demanded pneumatic drills and gasoline thawing equipment, burning fuel already stretched across 800-kilometer supply lines. Finnish intelligence provided the first breakthrough when engineers near Viborg disarmed an intact F-10, identifying the 3 operating frequencies. Germans deployed jamming equipment, but each station consumed 30 liters of diesel daily. 19 jammers ran in Kiev, competing for fuel with transport vehicles and emergency heating in temperatures below -30. Listening teams needed specialists pulled from signals intelligence, scanning 4 hours per building, rotating every 90 minutes to prevent cold casualties. The 3-month battery life meant buildings remained under surveillance through March 1942. Guard rotations consumed infantry manpower, while frontline divisions fought through spring mud. Every occupied structure required continuous monitoring, periodic sweeps, and defensive jamming. The F-10 had weaponized paranoia itself, forcing the Wehrmacht to bleed time, manpower, fuel, and sanity searching for detonators they could rarely find. Soviet factories produced approximately 5,000 F-10 sets between 1941 and 1945. The weapon proved that a retreating army could inflict strategic damage long after leaving the battlefield. A few hundred kilograms buried deep enough could eliminate a divisional headquarters. Thousands of such devices could paralyze an occupying force across an entire front. The 30-meter antenna remained the system's primary vulnerability, and German infantry eventually learned to search for buried wire networks. But each discovered antenna confirmed a building's targeting and demanded complete structural clearance. Each undiscovered antenna maintained the psychological pressure that had become the weapon's most potent effect. The mine's inventor, Bakari, never saw his creation used. He was executed in Stalin's purges in 1937. But his designs created a weapon needing no human operators to remain lethal. The receivers waited in darkness, autonomous agents embedded in foundations for signals that might arrive in minutes or months. Ironically, the same strategic depth that complicated the German advance on Kiev in July 1941 manifested in a different form months later. Not as kilometers of steppe between armies, but as meters of earth between German officers and the explosives beneath their desks. The F-10 proved an unbreakable principle of Soviet military doctrine, that even in retreat, even after abandoning their own cities, the Red Army could reach back across the front lines and strike from beneath the conqueror's feet. The earth itself had become a weapon, and on the Eastern Front, even the by conquered ground fought back. If you enjoyed this deep dive, hit subscribe for more untold World War II history every week. Thanks for watching.